All right, welcome back to the Starbrook Murders. I'm your host, Andy Hale. I've got my trusty sidekick, Whitney Brown, with me here today. Whitney,
Pleasure.
it's been a while.
I know. I mean,
Yeah,
not a while for us. We've been talking incessantly about this, but a while for the listener at home.
yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. Not a ton has happened, but I've got some updates. So let me kind of rewind.
Okay.
And I wish it wouldn't have taken so long for us to do this, but we had an April 10th court hearing. Okay. And we presented three motions basically at that court hearing. It was our claim of innocence, our claim of constitutional violations, and a motion for discovery. Okay, so let's take those in order. On the motion, on our petition claiming Chester's innocent, Will County had filed a motion to dismiss it, claiming our evidence either wasn't new, wasn't material, wouldn't have changed the trial result. We had oral argument. The judge took that under advisement. Then in our constitutional claims, we submitted those as a stage one proceeding. So the state can't even weigh in. Just the judge does at that point. So the judge took that under advisement. And he set it for a status hearing on on July 1st, which we just had. So what he said on July 1st was he's still reading some of the stuff. He set it for another hearing date, September 11th. That I think is going to be a ruling date. I think that's when we're going to find out whether we've won or lost on the innocence claim. And by that, I mean whether it advances to stage 3, which is the final stage, which will be an evidentiary hearing. The constitutional claims are only in stage 1. So we're hoping those gets to stage 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're going to know all that on September 11th. And he also ruled back on April 10th about our discovery. And it was a little disappointing, I got to say. We had sought to take the deposition of Louis Getch,
Yeah.
the Justice of the Peace. That was denied. We had sought to take the deposition of Stephen Kindig, the polygraph examiner, who claimed Chester failed that polygraph exam. That was denied. We sought to analyze the confession, the Chester signatures, because there were some anomalies there. That was denied.
Why?
Well,
Why?
let me finish them all out. Yeah. We sought to analyze the red fibers. That was denied. We sought to, let me think what else we had here. Oh, those locks or curls of hair. That was denied. The only thing we won on was the right to test this little piece of like a wood fragment. The judge basically said none of that other stuff was relevant to the innocence claim. We obviously disagree. So all that got denied. Wasn't able to do any of that.
Yeah.
Just
Okay. I'm sorry. Let's walk this back here. How is the testimony of the polygraph examiner not relevant to the innocence claim? How is the testimony or, getting a deposition from the gentleman that signed the original warrant for the arrest at 2:00 in the morning? I'm sorry. I'm having a really hard time trying to rationalize how none of this could be relevant.
Well, I think it was hard, especially with Louis Getch, because he told the family in the grocery store, just a few months ago, he's innocent.
Right.
So what does he know? I think the judge was saying that was more relevant to the constitutional claims, meaning there was no probable cause to arrest him. But maybe Louis Getch knew things about the case that were relevant to Chester's innocence.
Right.
What Dummett did, how Dummett handled the case. You don't know until you can take his deposition.
Well,
Same
that's my
thing with
question. What is
Kindig.
the harm in asking? Why deny it? What is the harm in asking?
Well, good question. I don't know. I was actually pretty surprised we lost. I'll be honest with you. I thought we would win all that. It's discovery. Doesn't mean, we may or may not find something good out. Will County called it a fishing expedition. And I actually was so offended by that. A fishing expedition is a term where you're just kind of like You have no idea. You're just out there,
Right.
kind of flailing in the wind. I mean, these are some very targeted, specific people. And so, yeah, that was, we were shut down on that.
But then why okay, so then why approve analyzing or why grant the motion to allow you to analyze the wood fibers? How is that
Well, I guess,
acceptable?
the judge was saying he thought that did go to the innocence claim, and that, you know, we had argued, we had a, forensic pathologist say that, could have been a baseball bat used, baseball bat could have, splintered during the attack. So he let us do that one. And I do have an update on that. Microtrace just gave me an oral report. Unfortunately, nothing helpful. They concluded that it was a portion of a basswood twig.
Okay.
Basswood apparently is a wood that's native to the Starved Rock State Park. Although it is a hardwood, they told me it's a softer hardwood, not the kind of wood used for, you know, baseball bats or anything like that. There wasn't any evidence on that item to indicate it was from an object, like a man-made object.
Mhm.
So I'll be getting a full report, but that unfortunately didn't lead to anything significant. So the discovery was pretty much shut down. We argued the innocence claim and the constitutional claims are all under advisement. So September 11th is the big date. That's a huge date. I think we're gonna the innocence claim is gonna advance or not on 9/11, kind of on a historic slash ominous date.
Right.
And I'm hoping, if we win, if the judge says we've met our burden, the case would proceed to a final stage three, which would be basically a trial, an
Yeah.
evidentiary hearing. We'd put on our witnesses, we'd put on our evidence, and the judge would have to, at the end of the day, be a bench trial, rule whether that new evidence would probably lead to a different trial result, which I think it absolutely would have. I don't think this case even gets brought today. They wouldn't even charge it. I think it would get, laughed out of court, kind of, in the sense that the confession's so ridiculous. There's so much evidence of coercion, threats of death, surveillance the whole month of October. He recants it right away. Chester does. I mean, there's so many things that I don't think anybody would believe it for 1 second. Nobody believed it back in the day.
Yeah.
And when you combine all our new evidence, no, I think it would be, the jury would be out for about a half hour and they'd come back with a acquittal.
I hope. I'm telling you, Andy, I'm just uh as this case progresses, it sort of shakes my faith right in our system because yeah, I mean, it just going back to this notion that it's a fishing expedition. No, no, it's a quest for truth.
Well, Will County State's Attorney's Office too, and shout out to the Will County State's Attorney's Office because I know you listen to the podcast now. They referred to it several times during our argument. Um, uh, Will County, uh, feels like the hair on Mrs. Murphy is insignificant. Uh, they take issue with my characterization that it's that hair that we know came from one of the Bray brothers that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Um, what I said in court was, and I stand by this, that person was at the crime scene.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, the hair's there. That person was there. I don't know what that person did, but they were there and they participated in some way. Will County has not given me their explanation. What do they think happened? How do they think Mr. Bray, whichever one it is, hair got on Miss Murphy's finger with a root on it? They also said, oh, Mr. Hale's just saying that, since it had a root, that it came out involuntarily during his struggle. They don't have any expert testimony for that. Well, I don't know if I need an expert to say that. It's pretty common sense.
Right. I mean, I guess their explanation is that a bird carried it across town. I mean, I don't really know how to yeah, how did it just randomly show up there if not from a participant in the crime?
And what Will County does, the standard is you have to analyze our evidence collectively. Okay. So we've got the hair, the genealogy, evidence. We've got Roy Tyson saying what Smokey Rona told him. We've got the woman who said what her grandfather told her about the Chicago Mafia. We got the telephone operator memo, on and on and on and on and on. Collectively, does that evidence potentially change the trial result? Okay. Will County never addresses that issue. They just one by one say, oh, well, that's not enough. And item A is not enough. And item B is not enough. And, individually, they don't even take it collectively to analyze it that way. So it was so frustrating because it's turned into this adversarial process when it should be a search for the truth.
Right.
We should be analyzing all the evidence, just like that wood fragment. Okay, it came back to be a portion of a basswood twig. Okay, fine. Let's look at the rest. Let's look at everything and see how it shakes out. Don't we want the truth? But it just seems like, it just turned into this hardball, you know, uh, case where they are opposed to everything I'm doing. Um, and that's just where we're at, and so it's all in the court's hands now. I mean, we've already argued it. So I think we're literally going to show up on September 11th, and the judge is either going to read his ruling or just hand it out. Um, and I think what he'll also
What do you
do,
mean handed out? Talk me
well,
through that. What
it
is that?
depends on how long it is, So oftentimes, sometimes judges, if the opinions are, let's just say it's a couple pages, the court will just read it into the record and
Mhm.
then give copies to the lawyers. But if it's longer, let's say it's a longer opinion, which I don't think this would be. Sometimes they just say, they tell you what the ruling is, and then they hand it out. Like, oh, the motion's denied or the motion's granted. Here's a copy.
Okay.
But this judge, the last time, when we got leave to, um, submit the post conviction petition, he read his ruling into the record. Um, so I don't know how it's going to play out. I'm staying positive. I'm staying optimistic. I think we've clearly met our burden. The case should get to stage 3. He may parse out some of our evidence and say some of it he doesn't think is newer material. We'll see how that goes. But we're getting close now. We're getting close to the end of the road here. And so the stakes are high.
It's like equal parts excitement and nausea,
Yeah.
you know, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's nausea. I mean, for anyone, I I know that there are a lot of people who have listened to this podcast and kind of been on this journey with us because I probably, a couple times a week get a phone call from somebody who says something to the effect of like, I haven't heard you guys give any updates. What's going on? What's going on with the Chester Uyghur case? And and it's always like routinely followed with, I just I hope justice gets served. I hope justice gets served, right? It's just sort of this automatic response from people, and I hope that, to your point of, they could just hand out the ruling or they could read it into the record. I hope whatever the decision comes back as, after 64 years, that the time is taken to read it into the record, that
Yeah.
respect is given to the
Yeah.
severity and the gravity of this case. I hope it is not just handed out.
Well, it's really hit me. I've spent some time with Chester Uyghur. I've seen him a few times the last month. And I think it's hitting me harder and harder now as
Yeah.
we've gotten farther along and he's gotten older, what his whole life was taken from him. I mean, from
No.
21 to 85. When I was just there, I was just there for the after the court hearing on July 1st. And I was looking through some old photos of, his parents and when they were kids. And it's just a heartbreak. It's an absolute heartbreak to see. Um, and in my heart, I just know that, with our evidence,
Yeah.
um, Chester Uyghur had nothing to do with those murders. Nothing. Um, so I'm hoping we get our chance to have our day in court to prove it, to put on our evidence, for the world to see, put on our witnesses, put on our genealogy results, put all that in the record, and then combine it with a weak case that they had. The state had such a weak case. Um, and go from there. So September 11th, that is a huge day. You might have to fly out to Chicago for that, you know.
I'm getting a ticket. That's a guarantee. It's
We'll
happening.
have to record a podcast like, that night,
Yeah.
talking about whatever happens.
I'm gonna be sick to my stomach. Little anecdote, I was at Costco, and, of course, the 4th of July holiday is coming up, and I'm standing in line, and I'm angry because we're standing in angry is a strong term, but I'm frustrated that we're standing in line, that it took so long to park, right? And I made a kind of a crack. I said, "I feel like my life is being stolen from me right now, right, in line to buy bulk products at the grocery store." And my husband said, "Whitney, relax. It's not Chester Weger's situation. Just relax. What you can." and
I mean,
and I
you had the privilege of waiting however long you waited to buy groceries.
right, and I just thought to myself, "Man, Andy, I'm not an easily flustered person. I'm not a person that gets easily angered or annoyed, but I get frustrated when I feel like my time is being taken from me. I cannot
No.
I'm serious about this. I can empathize with most situations. I cannot imagine. I cannot put myself in his shoes. Cannot imagine being from 21 years old to 85 in a prison cell
Yeah.
and not being able to fight it.
Oh, I know. And nobody
I
believing you. Nobody
and no
wanting
one
to hear
believe
you. I mean, I think you start out, and I've thought about like what I would do. And I think like, I would be like, you know, screaming at the top of my lungs, I'm innocent, I'm
yeah,
innocent, I'm innocent all day, every day. But at some point, when your voice isn't heard and nobody's paying attention and you just it fades away. You stop telling your story, you stop writing letters to people, you kind of give up. And you resign yourself to this is just your fate.
right.
And I just, with Chester being 85 years old, I feel such enormous time of the essence pressure
Yeah,
to get this done. Um, and so, yeah, I just really, really, like I said, uh, this hearing on 9/11 is going to be key. To get to this third and final stage. Um, we need to get there. And I just go back to the genealogy result. I mean, Will County hasn't advanced any rationale for, what this means. They're saying, well, I haven't shown that one of the Bray brothers was connected to the mafia or Smokey Rona or any of our theories of the case. Well, what's more obvious is the brothers have no connection to Chester Weaker. You know,
yeah,
they're all 60 plus. Chester Weger's 21 years old. We don't know. I mean, I have the disadvantage of investigating this, 65 years later. I don't know much about those Bray brothers. I'm stuck with newspaper articles,
right.
and nobody else will talk to me about it. It's not like the living Bray descendants are knocking on my door, giving me interviews. I mean, they refuse to take DNA tests, which is their right.
Sure.
Uh, so I'm handicapped in that sense. But nobody, has an explanation for why there's a hair on Francis Murphy from coming from one of those brothers. Um,
Let's just
which
turn the tables. I'm just so curious. Like, what's the best, most plausible scenario you can come up with for why that hair would be there if you were trying to argue the opposite?
I think the best argument would be it's somebody that basically processed the crime scene. Okay, now you still have a problem because the hair has a root on it. I refuse to believe that anybody that like was there handling the evidence,
Right.
collecting the evidence, had a hair with a root come out. And in my recollection from looking at those newspaper articles, if you remember, it wasn't just one hair on her finger. There were several. And
Right, right.
one of those hairs, a different hair, was sent to the Washington University Medical School, and they said it was dissimilar to Chester. Okay.
Mhm.
So it wasn't just one random hair, but I think, the argument that I got before we did the genealogy was maybe it's somebody in law enforcement or, a crime scene, investigator who, collects the evidence and processes the evidence. Okay. But now that we know it's one of the Bray brothers, all those are out. There
Right.
is no reasonable, rational explanation. None. There's not. And just because I can't prove right now that one of those Bray brothers had connections to other people, so what? I mean, uh, that person's hair's on there. And then what also Will County argued on April 10th, and I'm going to post on the podcast website, give me a little time, but I'm going to post the whole transcript of the April 10th hearing. It's 100 pages. I'm going to let people read it. Will County tried to argue with a straight face that my whole petition should be dismissed because it was so implausible that all the evidence canceled each other out because it was also contradictory, right? And that it was also contradictory that it was not considered a well-pled pleading. Okay, let me pause there. That was so outrageous to me because what I responded to that was the evidence is stunningly consistent, right? We first hear from Roy Tyson. We first hear from Roy Tyson about the Smokey Rona Chicago Mafia part, right? Then, unrelated, we hear about the woman with the grandfather story about the Chicago Mafia. We get the Steve Stout documents. We
Yes.
find the interview of Glenn Palmatier. We find that he's been hanging out with Lupe Cardenas. We find out he's connected to the mob right there.
Right.
That's huge. We find an article where Harlan Warren says, oh, state police, they didn't know what they were doing. They thought the Chicago Mafia was involved. I mean, it's stunningly consistent.
It's stunningly consistent. Also, like, I just feel like if you were writing this into a movie script, people go, "No, it's too much to say that the polygraph operator also golfed with one of the women's husbands, who
Yeah,
was a
I mean, and they
suspect
knew each
because
other.
his
Right.
secretary got pregnant with a son 2 months before, or
Oh
gave
my
birth to a son, excuse
God.
me.
I
I
mean,
it's just
on and on and on. I tell you, there's going to be, no matter how this ends, and I'm hoping, I'm praying it ends with a happy ending. I'm going to have a lot more to say about it. You and I will.
yeah.
There's going to be, I have so much more to say about this whole case, the way it's been handled, everything about it. But I want to stay focused now because we got a job to do and we got to win in court. Um, Let me mention a couple other things. So I announced this on social media, and I have a tip line. I took out a full page ad in the local in the LaSalle News Tribune and also the Ottawa paper. Had a full page ad and talking about the Stavrak murders. And the tip line for anybody listening right there, if you know anything, it's 833-386-6388, or as I like to say, 833 dumb it.
I love it.
I chose it for that exact reason. I think it's so fitting that, these tips are all should go to 833 dumb it. So if anybody out there, I don't, it could be something anecdotal, something your grandmother told you, something you heard. No tip is too small. Please let us know. I'd love to hear it. Also going to take up that full page ad in the Chicago papers because I thought, hey, Chicago Mafia, maybe somebody in Chicago knows something about this. And also the Aurora papers because of the Palmatier brothers.
Yeah.
And I got one more update, a little bit of a side issue. If you remember, if we go back in time, when I was talking to State's Attorney James Glasgow, back in 2021, when he told me he would not allow me to look at the physical evidence. Remember that?
Yep, I
He
remember.
told me it was complete disaster, Andy.
A
Complete
mess.
disaster. There's no point in it, which turned out to be a lie. It was not a complete disaster. It was amazing. So I did a Freedom of Information Act request for his phone records for that 1 week period when that was going on, because I wanted to see who has he been talking to. Okay, let's pause there. I did this in a prior case when I represented Cleve Heidelberg. We got him out of prison after 47 years. The state's attorney at the time in Peoria, a guy named Jerry Brady, was opposing us. He wound up not interviewing any of my witnesses, and he only interviewed the guy who prosecuted the case, who was his mentor. So I FOIA'd his phone records, and guess what? He had a bunch of phone calls with the former prosecutor, and that was it. So it's like, and so he actually got removed from the case. He got taken off, and a special prosecutor was appointed because what I showed was he was biased. So anyway, Will County, when I did that FOIA, they said, "Well, no, we're told by the phone company you need a subpoena." And I said, "Well, I went to my I've got some FOIA lawyers here in Chicago that are amazing. They specialize in FOIA law. They looked into it and were told by the phone company, "Oh, no, if it's the client's phone records, you don't need a subpoena. The client's just getting their own phone records. Will County is asking the phone company for their own records."
Mhm.
So we went back to Will County with that information. They said, "Well, that's not our understanding." So they wouldn't budge, and I filed a lawsuit. I have a lawsuit pending. We just filed it a little under a month ago against the Will County State's Attorney's Office for those phone records. So let's see how that plays out. Maybe nothing, maybe something. We
Yeah.
shall see. We shall see where that goes. So we're in a holding pattern till September 11th in terms of court.
Yeah.
What I want to stress to anybody out there is I am still investigating, talking to anybody that I can find, anybody who may know something. Uh, I'm still digging and digging and digging. So anybody listening who's got some tips or information or ideas, I'm all ears. So I've done a lot of talking. What what else do you want to say?
No, I mean, going back to this difference of opinion that that you and the state's attorneys seem to have over the legality of requesting phone records. It just puts me into this weird headspace of alternative facts, right? Like I just why keep stalling? Why? Why just keep stalling out on everything pertaining to this case? I mean, it just feels like they're in a little car driving ahead, throwing down spikes to try to pop the tires.
Yeah, like
And
those
and
old like 50s crime movies.
right. And I that's what's just so frustrating to me is that what is the harm at getting to the truth? What is the harm at giving phone records? What is the harm of allowing you to depose a couple of gentlemen that were
Yeah,
alive at the time of the crime? What
right,
is the harm in asking questions? And
right.
this is the problem. Is if you have a problem with asking questions, then fundamentally I feel there is something to hide. There should never be a fear of asking questions.
I agree. I got one more update I forgot to share. This is actually pretty significant. Through people reaching out to me, I met a guy kind of local to the Starved Rock area who happened to attend when he was younger, like this had been like in 1980 or 81, Bill Dummett's retirement party.
Oh,
And he said at one point he was sitting next to Dummett, and Dummett was had a few cocktails and basically said words to the effect, "Yeah," and everyone's kind of laughed about it. "Chester Weger was innocent, but I got him to confess." And I got an affidavit from him and I submitted it to the court. The court gave me permission to file it. I'm going to file it with the court. I've given it to the state's attorney's office, Will County. I think they're going to interview this guy. And what's great about this is, it's not a hearsay issue. It's straight from Dummett's mouth. So it's an admission.
right.
You know, this person heard Dummett say it. Um, so that's another little piece of evidence, and maybe not so little, And I've got so much. I mean, Louis Getch, was when I talked to him was like, he was like, "Yeah, bad Billy Dummett." That's how he said it, bad Billy Dummett. Like he had such a reputation
Right.
as a dirty cop, and if you go back and watch that, um, go back and watch the HBO
Yeah.
documentary. I just rewatched it uh recently. There are some clips in there where Tony Raccuglia is very critical of how dumb it was back in the day. Lousy investigator. I mean, he said this is actually in the HBO
Right.
film. Um, and I know I've heard him say things at other times about how bad dumb it was, how he'd pressure and coerce people. So it's incredible. It really just is incredible.
I think if there's one thing that there is no um sort of contest when I mean like no one argues that Dummett was problematic, right? Absolutely no one argues that he did anything by the books, right? And And so I just going back for a moment okay, assuming that this is true, that this gentleman went to a retirement party and heard Dummett say that. How horrifying! How horrifying. A
Yeah.
man so by the time Dummett's retiring, Chester's what, already been in prison for at least a decade, maybe 2?
20, yeah. This would have been, I think he said 80 or 81, so it would have been, 20 years.
20 years. So 20 years, Chester hasn't been able to see his kids, hasn't been able to be with his wife, he's been rotting in prison, his parents have died. 20
Mhm.
years, and at your retirement party, you're cavalierly joking, "Well, put an innocent man in prison, got the job done." Like,
Yeah.
ah!
Yeah.
It's so upsetting to
It's
me,
hard to
Andy.
it's
It's
hard to wrap
so
your mind around
infuriating.
it because you just can't imagine there's people out there who are like that, you know?
I know.
You just can't even imagine that. And so the other thing too, not only the Bray brothers, I've learned so little about these 3 brothers.
Yeah.
And by the way, nobody, and I mean nobody, has come to me with something like, "Oh, the Bray brothers, these guys were all pillars of the community," and I'm shocked to hear that. I mean, I haven't heard anything about these guys. I mean, it's just been radio silence,
Yeah.
and it's been the same thing with the Palmatier brothers.
Right.
I have learned, other than newspaper articles talking about, William Palmatier became mayor of Peru, Glenn Palmatier ran for mayor in Aurora. There are some newspaper articles about that. You get a little bit of context. And I know that William Palmatier owned a bunch of car dealerships, Rock Island.
Mhm.
That's the Moline area where
Yeah.
Robert Murphy lived. I mean, there's some dots to potentially connect there, but I have I haven't had anybody reach out to me to say, "Hey, let me tell you about Glenn Palmatier. Let me tell you about William Palmatier. Let me tell you about, these Bray brothers." Like, I just know there's some old timers out there. And I mean that, I mean, I use the phrase old timers, um, favorably. There are some people out there who know something that just haven't heard of me. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to reach them. That's why I got the tip line, the podcast. I took out newspaper ads. I mean, I know that there's 1 or 2 people out there who know something that could really help me. I just got to find them. I got to connect with them. And maybe me saying it now, I'm going to manifest it. I'm just going to have a connection go out into the universe and somebody's going to receive it. So that's my goal. So, oh man, I'm with you. It's half excitement, half nausea.
Yeah, I mean, because you can't you can't help but feel like with everything that has gone against Chester at this point that like suddenly you're going to just turn the corner. But on the other hand, it's like, but with everything that has been against him, he has to turn the corner, right? You has there justice has to be served. It has to go right in the end. There has to be, I'm not going to say a happy ending because I don't know that there's ever a happy ending to this story, but
No,
there
there's not.
has to be a
There's
sense of closure.
yeah. No, there's definitely not. And I thought about that. Uh, there's not. There's not. There is no happy ending. That is long gone.
Yeah.
When we got Cleve Heidelberg out of prison after 47 years, yeah, it was a glorious day. He walked out free, but it was a validation and a confirmation that he lost 47 years of his life.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And it was incredibly sad, incredibly, incredibly sad. All right, so to be continued.
Yes.
If I have any updates, I learn anything significant, we're going to jump back on here, record another episode, put it out there. Hopefully we do. I hope we're
Yeah.
talking again before September 11th. I hope we've got something to talk about. Um, but no matter what, we're going to be back in court on September 11th, 2:30 in the afternoon. It's going to be a big, big day. So, and it'll be here before you know it. So,
I'm gonna go back to Costco and buy us a bunch of Tums so we can just sort
yeah,
of pop antacids in
yeah.
anticipation.
So everybody out there, on behalf of Chester and his family, thank you for the support. Can't say how much we appreciate it. And keep probing, keep digging. There's more out there. So to be continued. And Whitney, great seeing you, and we'll stay in touch, okay?
Same.
We'll talk soon. Bye everybody.
Bye.